Well, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you really enjoyed the screening of 3,000 Nights as much as we do. It's been an honor to be able to represent this film and share it with you tonight, and as a way to recognize the plight of political prisoners at this time, but also celebrate Canada's Mother's Day. We would like to thank our partner Cinema Politica on Demand for sharing the film with us tonight. 3,000 Nights is available on the Cinema Politica on Demand platform for future watching. Stay tuned for next week when TPFF has our annual Nakba commemoration events. On May 15th, which is Friday Nakba Day, we will be screening the documentary 1948 Chaos and Catastrophe, followed by a Q&A with the directors. And on May 17th, which is a Sunday, we will be streaming the hit play Taha, the story about Taha Muhammad Ali, a famous Palestinian poet, and his life. All the details are available at tpff.ca, so you can find out how you can stream both these films from our website. TPFF is planning to hold its festival on September 23rd to 27th. It will be in some format. We're still not sure what it's going to look like. However, the feedback from artists and audiences through our Virtual Pals programming has been overwhelming, and we can support our artists by sharing their works at our festival. The pandemic has affected us all, including TPFF, who has seen its funding decrease significantly. Please help us keep going by sharing our events on social media and joining us. That means a lot to us. But if you're also able, please consider a small donation to the festival. A donation of any size will help us. And you can do that through our fundraiser page that's on our social media pages or directly through the tpff.ca website. All the funds go directly to the programming of the festival because TPFF is run by a group of volunteers. So now for our Q&A with Director Mai Masri. It is an honor and a pleasure to have her with us. I have been a huge fan of her work, and her film has probably been one of the first Palestinian films I've ever had the pleasure of watching, and definitely got me hooked on Palestinian cinema. So Mai, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dania. It's great to be with you.
I wanted to start off by congratulating you on your very well-deserved Career Achievement Award at the Alguna Film Festival. And there is also a new book called Love and Resistance in the Film of Mai Masri by Victoria Britton, published by Palgrave Pivot, about your 3-decade-long career. I can't believe it's been three decades. You definitely don't look like you've been doing this for 3 decades. I enjoyed really watching you on the red carpet at Alguna, and I am so thrilled, as the Palestinian and Arab film community are thrilled, that you were recognized in such an important way.
Thank you, Dania.
So I know another thing that you may or may not know, but 33 Days was the very first film that TPFF ever screened. Oh. And we had never seen, or never expected to see over 800 people lining up around the block on a hot summer day to see that documentary, which is set in a war, during a wartime. But we've never seen that in Toronto other than the big film festivals. So your movies have been connecting with our audiences for, over 13 years now. And we were very happy to be bringing this film, 3,000 Nights, to share with our audience again this year. I wanted to start, by talking about your work and your career. And Love and Resistance, I think, is a really great description of your films. They do deeply connect with audiences for their authenticity and integrity it treats its subjects. And many of your films have been documentaries. 3,000 Nights is a fiction film based on a true story and was filmed in a real prison. So how do you decide which stories you tell through the documentary format and which ones you tell through a fiction format? And why did you decide to go the fiction format with 3,000 Nights?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I was asking myself, because the prison, talking about Palestinian prisons, it's such an important subject. It can be done in documentary and fiction. But for me, when I choose a a style, whether I'm going to do documentary or fiction. I think it's based on the fact of if the events are actually happening and I have access to the real characters, the real people, I would go for documentary, especially in the Palestinian context, because it's so powerful and the real people are so, the real stories are so strong. And when we do fiction, I mean, we try, I mean, especially in my case, I tried very much to be true to the real stories. And the film 3000 Nights, I mean, in the end, I chose to do it fiction because it's a story I'd heard 20 years ago. And it stayed in my mind. And I met the real mother who had a child, a Palestinian mother who had her child in an Israeli prison. So this story stayed in my mind. And then 20 years later, I felt I had to do this film. And in fiction, because I couldn't have access, first of all, to all the real people. And it was a story that happened 20 years before. And I felt I also wanted to try fiction and be able to reenact in real time with drama and show all, and have control also over the medium, because with documentary, you have to be filming in real time. So this is a story that, and I wanted to work on other layers as well, like imagination, the kind of access that fiction would give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely see that come through, and I really, one thing we really noticed or enjoyed with the film is the use of animation to express an imagination. And I thought that was a really beautiful treatment, to connect, the thoughts of the child, because, and maybe you can elaborate what it's like to work with a child actor and the ease of that. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about the animation that came out of, that was used as a tool in the film.
Yes. Well, I mean, I was first of all, lucky to be able to film in a real prison, because you asked me about that as well. Mm-hmm. And working with, working with children, I've made several films, documentaries with the child main characters, and it's like my passion actually to work with children. And one of the reasons I wanted to make 3000 Nights is because it's such a powerful story of a mother and a child that's born in prison. So it was a huge challenge to find that child who's a 2-year-old child, and direct a 2-year-old child. It's like almost impossible, because they don't know what the film is. So it's all very real. So filming in a real prison with a child, I mean, that, I think to him, it was like, it was a mix. I think he enjoyed being there with all the actors. But at the same time, the prison itself is a very oppressive atmosphere. So, and we didn't have a chance to repeat the scenes, working with a child. You only have one chance for every scene, because they can't fake it or act or anything. It's very real. So there's scenes where the child is laughing, the birthday party, all that is very real. Even when there's tears, it was real. The fact that we filmed in a real prison, I think, made all the difference for the aesthetics of the film, the kind of poetic dimension for the actors. When you have real bars and real thick walls, and actors who also have come from that experience too, of prison, and also filming in a prison, they forgot that it was a film at one point. It was like, they brought a lot of their own experience into it.
Mm-hmm. So, can you talk a little bit about the history of this prison, and how did you even get access to film inside it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I filmed in a prison in Jordan that resembles an Israeli prison. It's a military prison. I was very lucky to be able to get access to the prison, because and it was also an like a military base that's empty. But getting permission was not an easy feat. But I think through a combination of a good support from my crew members, my production team, and I suppose, yeah, I mean, there was support from the Jordanian, also the Royal Film Commission, to be able to get the permission. But now it's impossible to shoot in the same prison. And I had done a location scouting all over the West Bank, looking for a real former Israeli prison. But that was difficult to be able to get access to any of those prisons. And most of them have been destroyed, by the way, by the Israelis themselves, or it's part of this whole campaign to erase memory. So there are very few prisons left that the Israelis used to use that I could have filmed in. So it was extremely lucky to be able to get access to that prison in Jordan.
Mm-hmm. And you also touched upon your cast, and you know, you had a really brilliant cast to work with. Some of them were familiar faces that we have seen in other Palestinian films. I noticed a few cameos from well-known directors. I loved when, you know, seeing Anne-Marie Jesser kind of appear. But can you talk a little bit about the casting process, and was everyone a professional actor, or did you have known actors or and sort of not, you know, lay people, friends and family come in? Like, how did you recreate, you know, the prison population in your film? And maybe you can talk a little bit about, you know, we never talk about the people behind the scenes, the cast and the crew, and the, you know, we always look at the finished product, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about the crew that worked with you, and you know, who are they, and are they people you generally work with, or is there sort of an internship process that you've built into your productions?
Yeah, I think the cast is very important, especially in this film, because it took me a while to get the right actors. Some of them are non-actors for the first time, but I had very good support from the crew. I had two casting directors who were very. They worked very hard to find the possible actors, and I did lots of auditions, meetings. Finally, I chose, and I mean, I realized that so many of the Palestinians, because the prison experience is such a powerful, like oppressive experience that's present. I mean, in Palestinian society, many of the actors themselves were either, some of them were former prisoners themselves, the crew members as well, or have family members who were in prison. So, I mean, they brought that to the film. And choosing, especially the main character, you know, Layal in the film, in the end I chose Maysa Abdel Hadi from Nazareth, she's amazing, very talented. And she brought a lot to the film, and all the others as well. I mean, even my daughters acted in the film too. Okay. They played roles. And some of them were non-actors as well. The ones who played the roles of the Israeli guards and inmates are Palestinian themselves. And I think that's amazing, the fact that they were able to pull it off. It's a testament, I think, to the talent of Palestinians, and also the fact that they're living under occupation and they see it in front of their eyes. So it's not something strange for them, you know. So yes, I had quite a few non-actors acting for the first time. But that takes time and patience to be able to choose the right characters, the right cast, because that's key. I think the script and the cast are the really very important elements. And of course, everything else, the location, the crew. This film, it's a co-production. So I had a French producer and a Lebanese producer. I had my crew were mainly Palestinian, all maybe Palestinian, Jordanians, and some Lebanese. Very talented, very dedicated, and I would say that for the cast and the crew, because we were shooting in, I would say, difficult conditions, in a real prison in the middle of the desert, kind of. And, it was not easy, and very, it was like almost summer, hot, in real cells with the, insects.
Wow.
With a child, was not easy at all. And babies, because there's a birth scene, so there's like a 20-year-old baby in this prison. But it was amazing, an amazing experience. And I had a fantastic cameraman, cinematographer, French, Gilles Porte, who really was, I added a lot to the aesthetics as well, because it's not just a story, there's aesthetics, and there's not much even dialogue in the film. There's a lot of visuals. So having a strong image, I think, is important. The imagery, the visuals helped. And I used my experience in documentary in this film. So a lot of it is shot like a documentary. Mm-hmm. Some people who saw it thought it was a documentary. And I think that's a big plus, because they believed it. They really felt, and they felt they were inside the prison, like in a cage, because the way it's filmed, always with the bars present, or through the, and the shadows, the light. Yeah.
I think actually we had that reaction at TPFF when we screened it. Some people left, and they were like, "That was a great documentary," and we're like, "No, that was." I think we did have to clarify that, but it's a testament to the work and the authenticity you bring to the work. And on that, the subject around Palestinian political prisoners is an important one to the community, to the movement. It is a sensitive one. It's a complicated one. It's layered. And we know, when you do your films, you make sure that everything is, you're telling the truest story that you can tell, with the people involved. And so can you maybe talk to us a little bit about the research process you had to prepare to tell a story or make a fictional film dealing with Palestinian political prisoners? And maybe, what you and it sounds like your cast, who many of them had relatives or had experiences with prisons, what were things you learned about yourselves or learned about political prisoners in the making of this film that you wanted to translate into the work?
Yes, I took years of research, actually, and many dozens of interviews. And I had friends of mine who were prisoners themselves, who were helping with the research and the interviews. And it's like an idea that I've had for 20 years. And then when I decided to make it, I really wanted it to be as true to the real stories as possible. So every single character in the film is based on a real prisoner. Mm-hmm. And the actors met the prisoners and spent time with them and were inspired by them. And I had a consultant who was actually a former prisoner, and I would always be asking her details, about what they wore, what they ate, what they did, on a daily basis, and not just kind of general, but the details. I learned a lot. I mean, this, for me, what really triggered the idea was the fact of the way the mothers have their children while they're in chains, and this was a huge shock for me. But also very inspiring, the whole image of a mother in chains in prison giving birth to a child, and this child being raised by all these women, and all these women being mothers to this child, how this child transformed the prison, and then the resistance inside the prison, And all this in the film is really inspired by what they told me. I mean, the way they did strikes, and the way the women inspired the men prisoners. The fact that this prison had had women and men sections. The fact that there were Israeli prisoners with Palestinians. I think that to me, that I did not know that. And I didn't know that the Palestinians had an impact also on the Israeli prisoners, on some of the Israeli prisoners, you know. To me, that was a powerful also. So yeah, I mean, this is I mean, prison is like it's something that's been present with the Palestinian struggle since the beginning. And it's a metaphor also for the condition of Palestinians under occupation. So this prison is like represents that.
And, you know, like during the 13 years that I've been programming for TPFF, I have seen a lot of films about prisons and prisoners. And most of the works tend to be focused on either child prisoners, or male prisoners. And this is probably one of the few, if only, glimpses that I have had an opportunity to see in film, about the female experience inside of like female prison population. And, you know, I thought it was, you know, sort of a unique piece that sort of completes the picture of what it's like to be, you know, prisoner, that there are female political prisoners. And the interesting piece that I thought too was you covering the organizing doesn't stop. The movement doesn't stop in a prison. Prisoners organize amongst themselves, and we saw that with the women, you know, taking agency over their own fates, even though they were locked up. And you know, to me, that was really a powerful part of the film, and you know, really appreciate that it was explored in your work.
Yes, I mean, that was and the idea of women prisoners it's not the first film I make about women prisoners. But it's a subject that very few people have worked on. It's surprising. As you said, there have been films about male prisoners, and even prisons. Actually, it's more or less in the past few years only that there have been Palestinian films. And I think 3,000 Nights was probably one of the first films, because since then there have been so many films, and I think that's very important to shed light on the, you know, condition of Palestinian prisoners, especially women and children, because this is like a shocking, you know, when you think that there's so many child prisoners inside Israeli prisons, it's like doesn't exist in other places in the world. And that the fact that most of the prisoners are political prisoners too, that also does not exist in other, you know, so you know, it's important to show those elements and to humanize the Palestinian story, because that also to be able to reach a wide audience and to tell our story and our narrative in the most human way, but without making concessions, you know. It's important to show the human side, but also the resilience and the resistance, because this is a right, and this is what defines also the Palestinian identity, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that women are so present in the Palestinian struggle, this is, and that, you know, that needs to be emphasized.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, on that point, you know, one thing that, you know, again, from my years in programming with TPFF, most years, at least half, if not the majority of our films are by female directors. And we do see the Palestinian female narrative being told in these stories. Can you, you know, now, you know, can you sort of reflect a little bit of, you know, on what the Palestinian, we don't have an industry, so, you know, we're not like other countries where we're, you know, you have a kind of close-knit group of filmmakers working together, but as best you can, from your experience as being sort of a pioneer in the Middle East filmmaking industry, can you talk a little bit about, what does the Palestinian film community look like? And, and maybe reflect even, about the role of women filmmakers, as trailblazers in the Middle Eastern film community, unlike, the North American one.
Yes, definitely. In the Palestinian context, at least half the filmmakers, if not more, are Palestinian women. And that's quite a, it's a phenomenon, really. And this is like recent, I would say in the past maybe 15 years or so. But the women are more and more, there are more and more women filmmakers, both in fiction and documentary, and their films are really of quality. And this, I mean, something to be proud of, because it does not exist in other industries. If in Europe or in Hollywood, even only 4% of, I think, films are directed by women, and this is shocking.
Yeah.
In Palestine, we don't have an industry, and there's so many women filmmakers. There's so many filmmakers, talented Palestinian filmmakers as well. We don't have an industry. It's a challenge to make films in that, and also under occupation.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
And so it's when a film is made, it's like it's not easy at all. It's a huge kind of struggle to make films. But at the same time, living on, there's so many stories that come out of that reality. Maybe that's what inspires, I think, so many people to want to make films, and so many women, because that's a way of, I think, expressing our reality through film. Maybe that's why the women gravitate to that. Mm-hmm. In the Middle East, there are other places. Lebanon, you have quite a few women as well, and Tunisia. But that's about it. It's not everywhere. Okay. I think in terms of the community, we are close-knit. It's true. There's maybe 50 to about 50 filmmakers, I would say, who are making films. And we meet in festivals mostly. So we're friends. A lot of us are in communication. I'm so proud when there's a Palestinian film that comes out, especially when it's widely screened around the world, or it makes it to the Oscars or to Cannes or to Toronto. I was so glad. By the way, 3000 Nights premiere, the world premiere in Toronto. That was really amazing experience. So it's great. And when our films are released in countries, but at the same time, it's important for them to be seen by our own audience, our Absolutely. Local audience. To me, that's the main audience. But if you can make a film that's universal, that's can touch people both locally, which is, the hardest audience is the Palestinian audience. But if you can also reach and touch people and move them around the world, I think that's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, and I definitely think your films do that, because the TPFF audience is, it's not just an Arab audience. It's very mixed, and I always wonder what the non-Arabs, are they going to get the nuances, the context? Will they be able to relate? And I've been amazed at how it does resonate. Even the inside jokes, somehow people get it, and maybe that speaks to the diversity of Toronto, and that we're a lot of cultures, and we know a lot about each other, and we find that commonality. But the films definitely they definitely resonate with our audiences. And I notice that our audience reacts sometimes differently than a TIFF audience. Sometimes I see a Palestinian film at TIFF, and I think it's a serious drama. And when I watch it at TPFF with the TPFF audience, I realize, no, it actually was a comedy. because the audience gets it a little bit more and they feel more relaxed in their community to openly express it themselves and react to the film. Um, so maybe you can, just to sort of end where we started off, maybe, if you can you maybe reflect about, what the Palestinian, and I deliberately use it, call it a community, not an industry, but, what that film, what does Palestinian cinema, what's its trajectory, present time, future, do we actually need an industry? Are we even better? Are we maybe, does this creativity and inclusivity, maybe, is it a function of maybe we don't have us not having an industry? What's the funding and production situation like for Palestinian filmmakers? And, has COVID or the pandemic, has it, impacted sort of that upward trajectory that we had been seeing?
Yeah, well, COVID did affect the whole world. I think it's changed everything. And for cinema especially, I know, films that were supposed to be filmed have stopped, release in theaters. I don't know what it's going to be, travel, all that. There's a lot of work attempt now to build a Palestinian kind of industry. It's a challenge. It's not easy because you need funds, you need a production, you need institutions, and there's work being done now. Now there's, or in the past few years. But at the same time, there are individual Palestinian filmmakers who are making films regardless, of the fact that there is no industry, support on the ground. But that doesn't stop the fact that there's initiatives and films that are being made, and with co-productions. In the end, that's the only way because we don't have enough support locally. So we try to get co-productions from different Arab and European and mainly funding. And a lot of personal funding also goes in, and also volunteers. Sometimes, a lot of times, the crew and cast volunteer some of their work. I think the fact that there's no established industry was one of the reasons why women were able to break into this field. It's surprising, but in the countries where there's a strong industry, like the US or even Egypt or India, there are very few women because they were excluded from the business kind of side. But the fact that in new countries, or countries with new cinemas, countries with new cinemas like Palestine, the fact that there's no male-dominated industry was I think, made it more equal opportunity. It's hard for everyone, whether they're male or female. So it's yeah, but I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about the future of cinema because and culture and art in general coming out of Palestine. It's very innovative, creative, expresses the kind of the suffering also on the ground, but in a very creative and new ways. This is the challenge: how to tell our narrative in different and new ways. And not. We need to find always a new way to tell our story.
I have to say, I've been impressed by what we've programmed over the Virtual Pals series that we've been doing, and the emerging artists that we were able to work with. And, the programming over the years, the, first-time filmmakers, ending up at TIFF for their world premieres, is incredible. And I look forward to, to more of that coming from, from Palestine and the diaspora. Can you, I don't know, just before we end, can you share with us if you're working on anything new that we might see at a TIFF or TPFF in the next little while?
Yes, actually, I'm working on a documentary. It's I love documentary. I thought I would do another fiction, and I do have that in mind. But when something big is happening, it's hard just to sit back and write your script. You know, I had to. I can't.
I
So
would
I'm
screen
hoping.
a commercial of yours if you did a commercial for bleach or whatever. I would screen it at TPFF. Don't worry, it could be
Yeah,
anything. I'm happy about anything you do.
yeah. So I'm making a documentary. I'm in Beirut with
Okay.
all the events and the. Actually, there's an uprising going on now in
Yeah.
Lebanon,
Yeah.
and the women are very prominent too in that. And there's change in the air, you know. So I felt that I had to be on the
Amazing.
ground, and that's what I'm shooting now.
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
yes, it's exciting to be part. I mean, most of my films have been in major historical events, and that's, it seems we're always living through turbulent historical times. So yeah, with a lot of hope always, though, in
Absolutely.
the future. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled for this new documentary. We will definitely need to schedule another conversation to get into what the revolution in Lebanon looks like, and what the new film is going to depict. So I will be bugging you again sometime in the future. I can't begin to tell you what an immense, immense, immense honor and pleasure it is to be able to talk to you, and just hear about your work and your processes, and to know that there is more work to come. I'm very excited for it. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and to share your works with us. You are really one of the most generous filmmakers that we've ever had the pleasure to work with in the past, and I hopefully look forward to our time together in the future.
Thank you. Me too. I'll come premiere it again in Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking for. I'll be the first in line. So thank
Okay.
you to our Toronto and global audience. Thank you for joining us for this amazing film and discussion with director Mai Masri. If you want to find out more about our upcoming programs, please visit the TPFF Instagram and Facebook and Twitter accounts, or you can go to our website, tpff.ca, for our Nakba screenings, as well as finding out more about how to make a donation to the festival so we can bring films like May's to the festival in the future. So thank you very much.